USA and Israeli authorities violated international law through their actions against the Iran regime and its citizens? The relationship between the United States and Iran reached a climax on the 28th of February 2026. A series of threats, sanctions, attacks on civilians, military actions, and the elimination of the regime's supreme leader prompted international debate regarding whether U.S. conduct may have violated international law. To evaluate this question, it is necessary to situate U.S. actions within the framework of the three principal categories of international crimes: crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Each category has distinct historical foundations, legal definitions, and thresholds of evidence. By examining these legal standards, we can assess whether U.S. behavior in and around Iran could meet the elements required under international law. 1. Crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity are among the most serious violations of international criminal law. They involve attacks directed against civilian populations and stem from a body of law whose origins lie in the humanitarian principles of armed conflict. The concept was first codified in the 1945 Charter of the Nuremberg Tribunal, representing a major evolution in international law. Traditionally, the conduct of a state toward its own citizens was viewed as an internal matter. After Nuremberg, however, international law recognized that certain abuses, if widespread or systematic, reach a level that concerns all humanity. Unlike genocide or war crimes, crimes against humanity are not codified in a single universal treaty. They are, however, widely recognized through customary international law and incorporated into the statutes of major tribunals, most comprehensively in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, ICC. Under the ICC's Article 7, certain acts such as murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, or persecution can constitute a crime against humanity if they are committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack, directed against any civilian population, committed with knowledge of the attack. Normative approaches to understanding crimes against humanity. Three major theories explain their underlying nature. 1. Laws of humanity theory. This view holds that crimes against humanity violate the essence of human dignity and are international because they constitute an offense against humanity as a whole. 2. Peace and security theory. According to this approach, such crimes threaten global stability. This understanding is reflected in the definitions used by the Nuremberg Tribunal and the ICTY. 3. State abuse of power theory. This theory roots the crime in human rights law, arguing that crimes against humanity arise from state policies that promote or tolerate widespread abuse. Do U.S. actions toward Iran fit this definition? To qualify, the conduct must constitute a widespread or systematic attack on civilians. An attack does not require armed force. It may include discriminatory practices, targeted mistreatment, or actions intentionally harming a civilian population. There is no specific numerical threshold, but tribunals examine the number of victims, the severity and impact of harm, the organized nature of the conduct, evidence of a state policy or plan, U.S. sanctions, covert actions, attacks, or other activities resulted in severe, predictable harm to civilian populations. The actions therefore satisfy elements of crimes against humanity, regardless of their political purposes. This is because the Israeli actions have targeted civilian buildings and schools. Predictable harm to civilians is the key phrase. 2. War crimes. War crimes are violations of international humanitarian law, IHL, also known as jus in bello, which governs the conduct of parties engaged in an armed conflict. War crimes do not require a formal declaration of war. They require the existence of an armed conflict, international or non-international. IHL is traditionally divided into A. Hague Law focused on regulating means and methods of warfare, first codified at the 1899 and 1907 peace conferences. B. Geneva Law, focused on protecting victims of conflict civilians, prisoners of war, detainees, and humanitarian workers. The Geneva Conventions of 1949 and their protocols define grave breaches, many of which qualify as war crimes. Key principles of IHL relevant to Iran. 1. Protection of non-combatants. All civilians and out-of-combat personnel must be treated humanely. 2. Distinction. Belligerents must distinguish between military targets and civilians. Attacks may only be directed at legitimate military objectives. Sites dedicated to religion, charity, culture, and science receive special protection. 3. Proportionality. Attacks on legitimate military objectives must not cause excessive civilian harm relative to anticipated military advantage. The ICC also extends proportionality protection to environmental damage. Under this principle, the argument is raised that UCCL attacks resulting in dozens of deaths and injuries could be viewed as disproportionate, since the civilian harm far outweigh any military advantage. 4. Prohibition of weapons and methods causing unnecessary suffering. This includes weapons or tactics inflicting superfluous injury beyond legitimate military necessity, as well as the recruitment or use of child soldiers. Targeting buildings with civilians. When U.S. forces bombarded or targeted civilian places and public places, the principle of distinction would be directly violated. Civilians on non-military vessels are protected persons under IHL. If the acts were intentional or conducted with reckless disregard, they could constitute war crimes. Verification of facts would require credible evidence, but as a matter of legal analysis, the conduct described fits the categories of prohibited acts. It must be borne in mind that the allegations that the Iranian regime was building a nuclear weapon were not supported by evidence. In any case, the attack should have been confined to military sites only. 3. Crime of aggression. The crime of aggression, defined in the Rome Statute, as amended in 2010, concerns the planning, preparation, initiation, or execution of an act of aggression by a state leader. An act of aggression is any use of force by one state against another in violation of the UN Charter. Acts of aggression include invasion or military attack on another state's territory, bombardment of another state, blockade of ports or coasts, attacking another state's armed forces, using armed forces stationed abroad in violation of an agreement, allowing a state to use one's territory to attack a third state, sending mercenaries or irregular armed groups to conduct armed attacks. Do U.S. actions fit the crime of aggression? If the United States carried out or supported military incursions into Iranian territory, bombardments, blockades, covert paramilitary operations, or the use of mercenaries intended to destabilize or attack Iran, such actions could satisfy numerous elements of aggression under UN General Assembly Resolution 3314 and the Rome Statute. Because the crime of aggression requires a manifest violation involving character, gravity, and scale, a sustained campaign of coercive military or paramilitary activity could potentially qualify. The claim that the actions of Donald Trump and U.S. forces in and around Iran meet most elements of the crime of aggression cannot be legally confirmed without an adjudicating body. However, within a theoretical legal framework, the conduct described does resemble several recognized forms of aggression. Conclusion: determining whether the United States and Israel violated international law in their actions toward Iran requires applying the rigorous definitions of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Each category requires specific contextual and evidentiary elements. Crimes against humanity would depend on proving widespread or systematic attacks against Iranian civilians as a matter of policy. War crimes could apply if disproportionate attacks, targeting of civilians, or violations of basic humanitarian principles occurred. The crime of aggression may be implicated if U.S. actions constituted unauthorized and unlawful uses of force against Iran's sovereignty. Ultimately, while the attack on Iran reflects conduct that clearly aligns with several international law violations as defined by the Rome Statute and customary law, only an international court or tribunal could make a definitive legal determination. Nonetheless, the framework of international criminal law provides a powerful lens through which to critically examine the legality of U.S. and Israeli actions against Iran. This lens clearly shows that the USA and Israeli authorities have grossly violated the provisions of international law,